Season 4 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, Polar Inertia, a journal of nomadic and popular culture, online at polarinertia.com, and Medivate, a community and set of tools to help you build the kind of meditation practice you'd like to have, online at medivate.com. After this 9-day trip, I feel like I've learned quite a bit about Danish culture in the form of the words they have that we don't have. And we're sitting in a cafe now that emblematizes this word, which I will pronounce as hygge. What is hygge?
It's being cozy. It's something like where we are now, with candles on the table, having a cup of coffee, a hot chocolate together, a nice warm feeling. I think that's the best way to describe it. But you can be hygge at home. You could be hygge with your husband, cuddled up on the sofa, a glass of wine, movie on the TV. But Danes will say something is hygge if it's cozy, if it's warm, if it's nice, if it's friendly. You'll often find that you'll have done something with someone, gone shopping or had a coffee, and they'll say, oh, that was really, det var hygge, that was really cozy. Right. And at first it takes you back because you're thinking, you use this word in so many different ways, but it is a feeling of warmth and of safety and happiness, I think.
And treated as a great national virtue, is it not?
Yes. Currently, I think one of the shops is selling mugs that say hygge, it has no translation. And I think that's very apt. So the best translation is cozy, but it's more than that. It's a real feel. And because we have such dark winters here, that's when being hygge comes into its own. People lighting candles down my street. I look out the window, people don't pull their blinds down, and there are candles in the windows, and you can see the family sitting behind at the table, maybe having their dinner, maybe having a coffee and a cake, and you're looking, and it's that warm feeling of looking in to somebody's home in that way with the candles there.
It is Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall, coming to you from Copenhagen, Denmark. In what neighborhood do we find ourselves right now?
This is Frederiksberg, or Frederiksberg, if you pronounce it in the English way. It's a city in its own right in Copenhagen. You have two different, you have Copenhagen and you have Frederiksberg. We have our own town hall here, we have our own council, and luckily for us we pay slightly less taxes by living in Frederiksberg. But it is part of the city. It's, you cycle 5 minutes from the city centre and you're in Frederiksberg. It's technically a residential area, but lots of shops and lots of cafes. It's a lively area, I like it, but it's also very family orientated as well.
We are in a very hygge-rich cafe in this area, and I'm speaking today, by the way, with Melanie Haynes, who is a British expat here in Copenhagen of a total of 4 years standing in 2 different stretches. She also runs a blog called Dejlige Days, which is about, I would say, how to best enjoy one's life in Copenhagen as an expat or otherwise. And here we've introduced another word that may need some explanation, dejlige.
Dejlige means happy, beautiful, pretty. It can be used in lots of ways. You would say, they would say dejlige day in Danish, because the word day is very similar in both, and it just means it's happy. Happy days is what the blog title means. And people would say, again, when people say something is hygge, they also might say something was dejlige. Right. It was nice. It was happy. We like, and flot is another Danish word, which means pretty and beautiful. So there are lots of descriptive words for nice things, for positive things, and that's what I try and do. I mean, I came here, I chose to come here, and so I've enjoyed life here, but I like to share what I enjoy and what I think is good about living in Copenhagen. Denmark always comes out top of the tables of the happiest place in the world, the best place to live, and of course, it's not always wonderful. No place is always wonderful, but I think on a daily basis, I find it to be a great place to live, and I like to share that with people.
I'm absolutely convinced in these words we have keys to the Danish culture, if only we turn them. But you came here, we were talking off mic about how you came here before you really knew a thing about Copenhagen, right? Or indeed Denmark?
Yeah, that's right. We were tired of living in the UK. We just got married, we didn't have kids. My husband went to his work and said, we'd like to live abroad. Where can I transfer with you? And they gave us a choice of southern Germany, Denmark or San Diego. San Diego was too far, didn't really fancy Germany, so we thought, Denmark, why not? And we figured, do it for a few years. If we don't like it, just come back to England. What have we lost? Nothing. It's an experience. And he started the kind of the process going with his work, and he was actually here for a work meeting in December, so I flew out and joined him. First time I'd ever been here, and I loved it straight away. But I think coming in December is a brilliant time to see the city, the sparkle, the Christmas sparkle, the ice rings. You know, it's hygge. It's perfect, and I loved it. And I went and I had the small boy, the open sandwiches, and really kind of tried out a little bit of Danish life in a few days, and I was convinced it was going to work for us. So we came.
Those open sandwiches are one of your essential items to eat that you've written about in your blog, and you have other items there that I have yet to try. Some that I have, you know, the hot dogs everybody eats in the carts, sometimes as part of their routine, standing there reading. But I feel like this is only my theory from being here a few days, but in Denmark, stick to Danish food, stick to Danish things, because if you stray too far, you may regret it.
There are a lot more. When I first moved here, there were very, very few ethnic restaurants. There were very few Vietnamese restaurants, very few Chinese places. But there are
surprised now there's so many.
Yeah, there are loads now, and that is great. And if you know where to go, you can eat very, very well. But yes, I mean, if you come here, particularly if you came here for a short period of time, you don't want to eat food you can eat at home. You want to try Danish food, and it's a very healthy way to eat here. Of course, they love their sweets on a Friday. They love their Danish pastries, but at the same time they eat råbrød, which is like the rye bread, the Danish rye bread. And when I first moved here, my neighbour said to me, you can eat a Danish pastry every day as long as you have a slice of råbrød.
That's the rule.
Yeah, that's the rule. So I was sort of, okay, that's fair enough. And yeah, Danish food is, I think, having lived obviously in the UK, and I lived in Germany for a while, I find the quality of food here is much higher. You know, it's much nicer, and also they are very, very strict. If you eat in restaurants, there's very, very strict rules about how food is kept in them. So you know, you can look in the front of a restaurant, there's a little sheet of paper, you can see how big is the smiley face for that restaurant. The biggest smiley face, elite smiley face, means it's super clean, super good, you know, they do everything perfectly. So, you know, you can look at that and you know it's a good place to eat. But Danes, they enjoy food. They do enjoy food.
In Los Angeles, we don't have the smiley face. We have letter grades. It says A, B, C. I think they make you shut down for a few weeks if you have a C, as far as sanitation. But the smiley face seems like a Danish way of doing it. Tell me, what were some of the early cultural experiences here you had that made you realize this was a different place than the UK?
I think the biggest thing was not having a car.
Oh, really?
Not being dependent. Where I lived in the UK, we both had cars. We drove to work every day. I was in my little metal box all the time. And here, I think the biggest thing was the fact that I could walk. It's such a compact city. I could walk most places. I could cycle on the dedicated cycle routes. I think that was the biggest positive cultural thing that I found.
Right.
Obviously, a different language was a big thing. Initially, I couldn't understand anything. You know, you see big posters advertising something that looks quite exciting. No clue what this exciting thing is. But I'm quite a bold person, so I ask. You know, I remember walking into the supermarket opposite our new apartment, and I wanted to buy cream to cook with. Right. There were about 4 different types of cream. Looked it up in my dictionary, word for cream. 4 different things. Which one is a cooking one? Which one is this? You know, I just asked. You know, I found that they were very, very helpful. But I think culturally, I think Danes are, although they're more about the community than the individual, I think they're quite similar to open-minded British people. So I found when I came here, I found it quite easy to talk to Danish people. But one thing about Danes is they're so curious about, why are you here? Why are you here in my country? And you tell them why you're here, and they just say thank you. When you say, you know, I loved it when I first visited and I wanted to live here and I'm really enjoying it, they'll just simply say thank you. Like every Dane is personally responsible for what a lovely place it is.
In a way they are.
Yeah, and it is very much a sort of a community feel to the place. But I came here with a very open mind. I came here seeking adventure. So I think perhaps things that were culturally different, I was just like, wow, that's something different. You know, I'm fascinated by that. Whereas I think some expats come and they're like, I really miss this. I really miss a 24-hour supermarket. I mean, that's another cultural difference. no shops open on a Sunday. That's changing, but when we first moved here, no shops were open on Sunday except the first Sunday of the month. Shops closing on a Saturday at 2:00 in the afternoon. I mean, in England, there'd be bedlam. People would go crazy. What am I going to do between 2 and 7? The shops are shut. And I think that was a big cultural difference that you have to adjust to. You can't just pop out and get something. You can't go out on New Year's Eve and buy a bottle of champagne because hardly anything was open and they sold out.
Right.
So, it was things like in the first year, the things that I felt, I should have thought ahead. But it is just, once you know how things work, you find that it's not a problem. I don't think it's a problem not being able to shop on a Sunday.
Right. There's a sense in which the most striking differences are the community differences. For example, coming here, at home in Los Angeles, I really only ride a bike around and don't have a car. I do that myself, but coming here, there's a difference between doing it yourself and the fact that everybody does that. For example, right, like everybody isn't shopping on a certain day. It's not just, well, I never shopped on a Sunday, I don't care. It's that nobody's doing it, right? No,
nobody does. Everybody uses their bikes. It's what you do. And people use bikes as transport. So you don't see people, unless they're very sporty and doing sort of sporty biking, you see people wearing regular clothes. You see women in high heel shoes and short skirts cycling their bikes to and fro, drinking a bottle of beer in the evening while they're cycling,
yes.
Which probably is illegal, but they're just it's everyday life is using a bike and not using a car, and it makes life, it puts you in the street. You're there, you're smelling things, you're seeing things. When I'm cycling, if I'm on my own and I see something interesting, I'm not in a hurry, I can just stop, hop off my bike, park up my bike, go in a shop, go in a cafe, I was cycling this morning, there's some very interesting churches that I've not seen before. So I just hopped off my bike, took some photographs, got back on my bike, and on I went. And I think when you're in a car, you're in a box.
And you can't stop, really.
You can't stop. No, you can't just go, I'm going to stop. Oh, that looks interesting, get back in. It's not possible. And
you can bring out your €5 for parking.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that difference. When my father comes with his car and he says, should we drive into the city? And I say to him, the time it takes you to get in the car, drive into the city, find somewhere to park, pay for your parking, we'd have been there 15 minutes already on public transport. So it's just not a car city. It's increasing. There are more cars than I think there were before, but I think it's something like 70% of households only have a bike and no cars. And there's a big bridge, which is the main thoroughfare into the city for bikers. And I think I went past there on a Saturday, and already 30,000 bikes had gone past.
Oh, yeah.
And that's on a Saturday. So you can imagine what it's like on a weekday.
Oh, my. I think about which pictures to send back to America. Posting them on Facebook and whatnot would blow the American mind the most. And I think it's got to be, the Danish girl in spike heels and a skirt on a bike with a cigarette and a cell phone talking into it at the same time. There's so many things that American mind can't process. What is striking to British friends back home when you tell them or show them certain things?
I think when they come here, the thing that strikes them is how many individual businesses and shops there are.
I see.
In England, probably like America, where you've got a lot of malls, you've got a lot of high streets where you could just be dropped into that high street and it could be any town in any part of Britain. But what they love here is that there are chains, but there's also a lot of individual shops selling quirky different things, lots of different coffee houses. So for visitors, I think that's the thing. When I always say to friends, what struck you as being different? And that's one of the things they say. And I think sort of picture-wise, people love the skies here. I don't know what it is about Copenhagen skies, but they're always so moody one way or another. They're either like pure blue or there's a very low cloud, and I think those skies, people love looking at them and seeing, because weather changes so fast here.
And everybody mentioned the light too.
Yeah, it is. In the summer, in the evenings, with the sun doesn't really go down till midnight, and then comes up again at 2, 3 in the morning. I think that light, that warm glow in the summer is perfect. There's actually a new housing development out in Vesthammer, which is further out in the city, and it's called, I'm not sure I pronounced it correctly, but it's Odertal. It's shaped like a figure 8. Oh, yeah. And it looks over a nature reserve, and the sunsets and sunrises that people photograph there are just amazing. I think it would make the price tag of the apartments worthwhile just for that to look out on your balcony every day.
And that's the kind of thing you write about on your blog. What else draws your attention in a way that you really want to make it public, make it known to more people?
I started when I first moved here, I started my own personal blog, which is now my son's blog, basically. It's for the grandparents to see what he's up to. And when I was in Germany, I wrote about things to do, and that was very popular. When I came back here, I started doing that a little bit, but then I also started writing about lifestyle things that were different, cultural things, and I find that that's the most popular thing that I write about. So I like writing about festivals. This Sunday is Mortensaften, which is a big festival where basically we eat different food.
Yes.
Most festivals here involve eating different food. You eat a roast goose or a roast duck, and so I like sharing those different cultural differences. But also, people seem to love hearing about Danish design, and I love looking at Danish design. I love exploring that, and I think that's what I like. I like to share the more relaxed life of Denmark. When we first moved here, someone said to me, in England everyone's in 5th gear, here you're lucky if you reach 3rd gear. It's a slower, and I love, just in this cafe at the moment, there's a couple sitting over there, they've got a little baby with them, they're sort of, having a bowl of soup, and it's a Wednesday lunchtime. And that's what I like to try and convey, is that this is a relaxed city, and there's a lot to explore, and it's maybe little, but there's so much under the surface.
One of the posts people have liked is called, I believe, Becoming Danish, Becoming a Dane, about how to integrate yourself better into, or how to lock into this life better here in Copenhagen. And I feel like I see a lot of places that offer services like, did you just come to Denmark? Here's some ways we can help you become a Dane. Is this a place that offers you a lot in terms of actively helping you settle in?
There is a big idea that you need to integrate here. Danish people, I remember a friend, and I'm sure he won't mind me telling this story, but he said that when he came from Africa and he married a Danish lady, and he said when he first came here, before they were married, people were quite racist towards him. He didn't speak Danish. He was very black because he was African. Yes. They were quite racist towards him. Then he went to language school. He learned to speak Danish. He speaks excellent Danish. All of a sudden he felt that people's reaction to him was different. And he realised that it wasn't about being black or being African. It was about not being able to speak Danish and not seeing it as making an effort to try and integrate into Danish society. Right, yes. And he realised that he misunderstood the attitudes towards him. And I would agree that when I first moved here, I couldn't speak any Danish. And the old lady in my building, I'm sure she was saying very, very rude things to me in Danish. And they were probably of the ilk of, you don't speak Danish, what are you doing here, kind of thing. And I think that, integration is important. But there is also quite a strong expat community. There's a strong French community here. There's a strong American community, and they can live, because they're here for short term, they can live in a little bubble. They can have their bonfire night for the British, they can have their Thanksgiving, and they don't feel that they need to have that
in little Britain, literally.
They don't need to feel that they need to integrate, and they're happy like that. But I think the integration is important to enjoy Danish life, to try and adopt, using your bike, using a little bit of Danish, understanding a little bit helps and makes people warm to you more with integration. But I think, yes, it is an important thing to Danish people, and they do help you. I mean, if you want to learn Danish, it's free. Once you've registered, you get what they call a CPR card, like a yellow card. Once you have that, you can get free Danish classes, and as part of the Danish class, they do a cultural class as well, which I did. They take you to the Parliament building, they take you to things so you can understand about Danish life.
Do they teach you to make those sandwiches?
They don't teach you to make them. You have to learn that the hard way, unfortunately.
Better experience,
yes, it's but
not easy to master. I mean, it's a sandwich, but I can't imagine they're easy.
I'm always joking with my mum because she likes to mix up her toppings, and I always say to her, the sandwich police are going to be round, and they're going to say, you've got horseradish and you haven't got it with the right meat.
The combinations are specific. People have explained them to me, but I obviously haven't memorized them yet.
My husband says he watches at work that people will, in their canteen, they have like a sort of a sandwich bar, and he will watch people, meticulously put their piece of bread down, put spread their bread, their butter on it, put then the topping, and they'll meticulously do it. Whereas he just kind of gets a piece of bread, dollops a bit of sort of salad on the top, and goes and eats it. But everybody is doing it properly because that's how it tastes better.
Right.
It's
they know the procedures.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. But there is a lot of Danish people I know are married to non-Danes, and a lot of Danish people go, particularly in their 20s, they go to other countries to experience life, Australia, America. But there's always a joke that they always come back and they only go there to check that Denmark is still the best place in the world. And it is still the best place, so then they come back. And when it comes to having a family, Danes want to be back here.
The story of that African fellow makes me think of a bunch of language issues here. And for example, it was probably the same with you, but I've only been here a few days, and without exception, people address me in Danish, and then I have to explain I'm not Danish, so there's that exchange. And then we'll start talking, and sometimes they'll accidentally go back to Danish. So even though English is so easy to use here, I feel like I'd have to learn it to avoid the grind of apologizing for I'm sorry, I'm not Danish, sorry, I'm not Danish. Eventually it feels like you're just saying, you're literally sorry for your non-Danishness, right? You're apologizing. Was it the same with you?
When I first came, I kept saying to people, I am learning.
Yeah.
I'd say a little bit of Danish, and so that's as far as I can go, but I'm learning, I'm going. I am learning. And it is funny in the workplace, because a lot of workplaces here will have English as their business language. Everywhere my husband's worked, it's been the same. But when the Danes are together at lunch, if they're talking about work things, they speak in English. If they're talking about social things, even with just Danes, if they're talking about social things, they revert to Danish. And a lot of people don't realise that he can actually understand Danish, because he doesn't speak it a lot. And, he'll have people talking very indiscreetly on the phone about, perhaps looking for a new job or something like that, and they don't think he can understand.
Is he their boss?
No, he's not their boss. He's just
he's not going to get in trouble with it.
No, and it wouldn't surprise me, but he'll hear people having very personal conversations, and they're thinking, oh, well, he can't understand, so they're chatting away, and he's thinking, actually, I can. And it's quite fun not to let on you can speak Danish sometimes. When we had our removal guys moving us here, they were having a really, really heated debate about whether they were going to have a kebab for dinner or go to Chinese. And they were like an old married couple, because obviously they worked together, and one was like, we always go for Chinese, blah, 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 blah. And then I just, in English, because they've been speaking with me in English, I just turned and said, actually, the Chinese at the end of the street is pretty good. And they were like, oh, wow, she understood everything we were saying. We've got to be a bit more careful.
This is for a more recent move, not to, of course, Denmark, but within Denmark. And you've lived a few places here, haven't you?
We've lived 2 different places here. When we first moved, we've always lived in Frederiksberg, this area. We lived in a smaller apartment before we had our son, and then we had him, and we lived there, and we were thinking maybe we needed a bigger place, but we ended up moving to Berlin for 18 months, and we had a very big place there. And then we moved back here just this year in January 2011, moved back, so we're in a slightly larger apartment now.
It sounds like in the Berlin period you had was sort of the same function as the Danes going abroad, just to teach you how much you liked Copenhagen, right?
Yeah, Berlin was not a choice. It was a choice, but it wasn't something we actively said, oh, let's go and try living in Berlin. It was a choice that we needed to make at that time. And it was a completely different experience to moving here. And I think had I moved to Berlin, from the UK to Berlin, I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. But I had that kind of Copenhagen experience in the middle, and I was very, very homesick for Copenhagen. I found Berlin an enormous city, very dirty. The Berliners do pride themselves in being kind of rude, and I struggled with that. It took us almost 3 months to find a permanent apartment to live in. We were living in serviced apartments, which are very sterile. We had 4 jumpers each, which we wore in rotation, and my son had a handful of toys, and it was quite tough. And I tried to have the same kind of sense of adventure as I had here, but I found as a city, I just didn't get it. I didn't warm to it. The history's fascinating, and sometimes I think perhaps we lived in the wrong area, but we lived in a very former East Berlin area.
I was going to say, not much hygge in former East Berlin. They're not their quality.
It's quite austere there. It was quite old-fashioned. you know, the shopping centre was built in the 80s. It was very 1980s. Our street was interesting. If I took myself away from the fact I didn't enjoy living there and I looked at our street as a concept, it was fascinating. Most of the apartment buildings had been renovated, but two of them on the corner had not, and they still had bullet holes in the wall from when the Russians came in to liberate Berlin. And you know, a lot of the people around there were very old, and at first I found it difficult to understand why their demeanour was the way it was, but reading more of the history I started to understand why their demeanour was how it was. My German was not very good. I took 30 hours of lessons. It was just about enough.
Not quite enough to get there, is it?
Enough to kind of function, but I ended up having to have an operation in hospital there, and I was in hospital for 3 days, and not one person spoke English to me in the entire thing. I skipped ahead in my textbook and did the hospital section, so I was okay, but I didn't find it as a warmer place to live.
Certainly Germany is it doesn't sell itself that way, so at least you can't say that they sold you a false bill of goods, but at the same time it gave you good reason to come back here.
And it's brutal. The winter's brutal in Berlin. The winters are cold here, but it was brutal there. But the winters here, I mean, you normally get snowfall around December, and it stays until it melts in the spring, which is great for sledging. And we have ice rinks. They're actually putting one up at the moment. They're going to put the ice on probably next week, but there are ice rinks all around the city, and everybody goes ice skating. The lakes in the middle of the city as well freeze, and you have to wait for the local authority to put up a sign to say it's safe to skate, but you can skate on the lakes, and that's beautiful. You've got these high, tall, colourful buildings either side of the lakes, and you know, you've got people of all ages skating. An old neighbour of mine, she was old in both senses, former neighbour, and she was elderly. Yes. She remembered when she was a girl that they used to have booths actually on the ice selling hot chocolate, and you know, everybody would just go there and would just skate. And she said, you know, nowadays it's not considered so safe to skate on all of the lakes, but in those days they just skated, and it was beautiful, and I love that.
Here we have another example of a custom that everybody does. When you say everybody does it in Copenhagen, you really mean everybody does it, right?
Yeah, I think that from a young age with the skating, you know, kids are taken up to the rink, they learn to skate, and people have a lot of people have their own skates, and it's a lot of things very cross-generational. You know, in our building there would be Marion, who was 70, who probably still went with her ice skates and skated, but then you've also got little kids, 2, 3, 4-year-olds, who are the next generation, who are going to be doing that because it's something that you do. It's skating, and it is. I think a lot of things here are very much a communal experience, shared experiences.
You almost need to be an expat to realize how many things are common experiences here, don't you? If you grow up here, it's sort of like, this is the way it is. But that's whether you're living in a place you like Copenhagen, or a place you don't like so much, like Berlin. What perspective do you find you get being from the UK?
I think sometimes I do think living here I do have slightly rose-tinted glasses because I love it, but I think you do sometimes take things with a pinch of salt. There is quite an old-fashioned idea of Janti-Law and Janti-Law, which is, you know, it's about the individual is not important, it's the community that's important. And a lot of people feel that stifles creativity and it stifles ambition.
People here feel it?
Yeah, some people here feel it, and people that see it from outside. Often in workplaces, people aren't very ambitious as they might be even if they were Danish, but they were in the UK or they were in America. And sometimes it's frowned on a little bit to be ambitious.
Oh, I see.
But that's changing. But I think
that's known in England as well, is it not?
Yeah, tall poppy syndrome. But yeah, we like people when they're on the up. We don't like them when they're up there. But you know, I've not worked in a workplace here. I've always worked as a freelancer. But a lot of people that work in workplaces say, you know, there's so much discussion, so many meetings about meetings to make a decision because everybody has to agree and it has to be good like that.
Right. And God forbid somebody dissented.
And I think that's one of the things as a non-Dane that I notice, that there's a lot of discussion to decide things and can get frustrating. But at the same time, a lot of people live in buildings here that are like can't remember what it's called in America, where everybody has a say in how the building's run.
It's a co-op.
That's it, a co-op. A lot of buildings here are like co-ops, and we used to live in one like that. And you would find the most mild-mannered people get so angry during that yearly meeting about things. You have people storming out of the room. And my Danish is pretty good, but when it's going that fast and people are shouting, it's kind of... And I think sometimes, I'd say to people after that meeting, wow, that was a bit full on. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's just like that. And I think that... And then after that, everyone's very pleasant to one another again. It's almost, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Whatever happens in that room. But I think that... But they just accept that. And there are small cultural quirks, like Danish women love wearing scarves.
Yes.
And I remember saying to a Danish friend, you wear your scarves in this country. She's like,
well, right now it makes sense weather-wise, but this is all year.
Yeah, but in the summer, sometimes you see, and people will say, Danish friends are like, yeah, I suppose, yeah, that's true, but I'd never thought of it.
It was like saying, you breathe a lot of air here.
Yeah. One lady that works at a museum that we go to regularly, she said to me, I was reading your blog the other day, I loved your thing about scarves. She said, I'd never thought of it like that. She said it was really interesting having another perspective on something that's just life.
Right.
So...
And I see we've been hygge. They've just put down another candle, so we can proceed safely. And you've expressed no real longing to return to the UK, so I wonder what perspective life here has given you on the culture you come from.
I have to be quite careful with this because obviously a lot of my friends still live in the UK.
Right, well, you can speak only for yourself.
Yeah, but I find when I go back to Britain, I find it so busy. So everybody's rushing. You watch TV and it's like, shave 2 seconds off your life by eating these noodles. And what are you going to do with this other 2 seconds? It's such a rush. And I find it... This is a capital city I live in here, but I feel almost like a country bumpkin when I go back to England. The supermarkets are so huge. There's so much choice. I feel overwhelmed. I find it so busy, and people seem to be concerned about the wrong things. They're concerned about, and this isn't necessarily my friends, but people seem concerned about what car they've got, what house they live in, and not what they're going to do, who they are, their family. It's more about things.
It's the symbols that surround them that tell them they're doing okay.
It's acquisition, and I that was something that I was getting turned off about when I lived in England. One of the reasons why I wanted to lead a slightly simpler life, and leading a simpler life in England isn't always possible, unless you want to live in the middle of nowhere. But, coming here, I found it was simpler, and that's what I found there. I mean, I went back, I think it was the first year we were here, I went back and my friend's son was sick, and he really wanted an ice lolly, a popsicle, and she was, looking after him. I said, I'll just pop up the supermarket. It's only up there, isn't it? I'll just go up there and get a box of ice lollies. So, got in the car, of course, drove up to the supermarket, went in there, and I just thought, I haven't got a clue where I'm going to find this. It's massive. And I went up to this shop assistant. I said, I just want ice lollies. Where are the ice lollies? And that's how I feel. I feel like it's too busy. So when I do go to the UK, I find that I go into a friend bubble. I just go and see friends and their families, and we go out for food. And I miss things like a decent curry and things like that. So I tend to do that. But, yeah, my perspective is it's just too busy. Too busy. And it's funny, my dad said the same when my parents live in France, and they've lived there for almost, I think, 11 years now, and he came back to visit us, and he never really likes me driving him. When we lived in the UK, he would always drive. He was the driver, and he just said to me, it's too busy here, I'm used to rural French roads. And he said, we went into Southampton, a local town. He said, I'm so happy you drove, because so many cars, everyone's so aggressive. And I think that's what it is. It's that kind of level of aggression and rush everywhere. Yet I don't think it's changed. I don't think it's any different, but I'm different.
I see. That aggression and rush, it sometimes translates in feel to... People feel like this on the Los Angeles freeways. Frustration, like there's a lot of just frustration built up in society. Doesn't seem like a super frustrated place here. I don't know what your feeling is on that, but people don't seem like they're always seething about something. No,
I don't think so. If you cycle in rush hour time, you might get called, there's a word, I think it translation is basically you're a country arse. They might shout at you and they might swear at you if you're a bit slow or you don't hand signal or something, but that's in rush hour. But yeah, I don't see a lot of aggression, and nobody queues here because we have number ticketed systems. In most places like bakeries and banks, if you just take your number, you sit down, they call your number, you go. You don't feel that people are getting sort of really tense about things. I'm sure some people do, and people are stressed here, but there isn't that level like there is in the UK, and I think most Danish people would admit that they are quite chilled out. They are quite relaxed.
I see. I think to your lament about not being able to find a decent curry here, and I think to the Danish conception of a taco I tried the other day. It was an interesting cultural experience. I probably won't be back for it, but I mean, it's the Danish food is the food to eat here, clearly. And sushi. The sushi's not bad. It's got cashews in it, I find, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah, sushi is a big thing. People love sushi here. And there is a great chain. It's a Danish chain called Sticks and Sushi. Probably the more expensive end of the sushi range here, but very, very good. But yes, I've noticed this about it. British people want a good curry, and American people want good Mexican food.
Especially if they're from the West Coast or from Texas.
Struggle to find both here. I found quite a good Indian restaurant now, or takeaway, and I basically said to him, I like my curry hot. And he said, right, we'll put double S, which means double stick, double strong, and it's as I like it. It's perfect.
I was wondering if that story would end up with you just hanging your head again, like doesn't taste like anything. I was at it was in Sweden, but it was a Swedish Chilean place. So right there, you're not. I mean, I shouldn't have even tried, but I was getting some empanadas, and the lady was saying, if you like it hot, we have some red sauce. It's like, just it was called red. I mean, it really was just red. Ultimately, if you like a dash of red on your food, we have that. But it's balanced out by everything else to eat being so good. So I guess, the universe sort of extracts what it needs to there from one genre of food, puts it into the other one. And I wonder, the laid-back life here, that seems like it must really make it a good place or a suitable place to raise a kid, does it not?
It is, and there's a lot. I mean, the government do a lot to help you. Your maternity is...
That's a year, right? You get a whole year.
And you can split it with your husband. So my husband had a month off when our son was born, and then he also had the whole of the following summer off as part of his paternity leave. So it's very flexible, and childcare is very cheap as well. A lot of people put their children into childcare at 8-9 months, which I know in America is not something people do, but it's paid for, it's very cheap, and it's very good. So that's very family friendly. But I think that one thing I noticed in Berlin, there are a lot more playgrounds, good playgrounds with climbing frames, things than you get here. But people at the weekends want family time. Places like we're sitting now on a Sunday will be full of people having brunch together with friends, family, that side of things. And it's very compact, it's very small. The first thing that my son said when we moved back here was how quick it was to get anywhere. Like, to go to the zoo in Berlin was like almost an hour to travel there. We just cycle up the hill here and we're at the zoo.
4 trains in Berlin.
Yeah. And it was just, as soon as we moved here, because he didn't remember living here before, but he remembered coming he remembered Berlin obviously because he just lived there, and then coming back, it was very interesting hearing his perspective of what was different here and what he liked. And, he just said, it's nice here, mummy. And, he just...
Well put.
Yeah, and I'm a real kind of Scandi mum, I've got my cargo bike, stick him in the front, cycle him off to school and cycling him around. And
that's another American mind-blowing thing, is the kids in a bike and on the front of a bike. We have sometimes the wagons that cyclists pull kids in America, but they're kind of, that they say that's a bit eccentric, and usually it's the dad wearing lycra and the full gear and elbow pads and whatnot. So This is different. This is everybody.
A lot of people would
Again, everybody does it.
Yeah, a lot of people when they have children would just get a seat that they stick on behind their seat on the bike. I've got the one with like the bucket in the front, which you can put your groceries and things in. I have a friend in Seattle actually who has a cargo bike just like mine.
Oh yes, I can see them catching on there. Grew up around there.
Well, she got it in Germany, then she moved it there, and I think a little of what you say. I think people think she's a bit eccentric.
Maybe she's a trendsetter.
Yeah, they look at her and they go, oh yeah, that's that interesting lady with her cargo bike. But it is a family friendly place, and you don't have to go to a family restaurant for your child to be comfortable, or you to be comfortable with your child.
Right. Which in America, I don't know tell me if it's the same in the UK. Going to a family restaurant means, well, the food's going to suck, number one. Number two, it's going to be very loud because everybody else has kids and the kids are loud there. So, same in the UK?
Yeah, it is. But here, I mean, there are, Jensen's Biff House is like a family restaurant. My son sees the advert on the bus all the time and was desperate to go, and it wasn't that great. It was average food, but it was that sort of thing. But I take him for sushi, I take him for Vietnamese food, I take him, open sandwiches, I take him anywhere, and there's no kind of, oh, you've got a child. There are a few of the upscale restaurants in town which they don't provide high chairs. If they don't provide a high chair, they don't really want you there with a baby. But it's
not going to make it easy for you.
No, but it's rare. A friend of mine actually took her own high chair there, and they were appalled by this. But and you don't get a lot of kids menus. A kids menu will be smaller portions of adult menus.
That's an innovation we need in America. I mean, it's been a long time since I've had a kids menu, but it's chicken fingers and spaghetti and grilled cheese no matter the restaurant. Here you get, that sounds like a sensible way of doing it, and the kids learn to appreciate things, I would imagine, whereas if you eat grilled cheese for the first 12 years of life, you can't get your bearings when you become an adult.
No, I mean, my son's always been quite adventurous in what he eats, which possibly is slightly unusual, but yeah, I mean, you do get the chicken fingers, you do get the fricadella here, which are like a kind of a meatball crossed with a burger. Sure. They'll often have those on the menu, but if you go places and you say, can you just do a smaller portion of whatever for him, they'll go, yeah, that's fine, because they appreciate that children should eat food, different food. I remember saying to liver pasta is like a kind of a liver pate here. It's baked, and I remember my son loving it as a baby, and I was very worried because in England, people are obsessed with how much salt do babies have and how much this and that.
That's the thing of the moment.
Yeah, and I was thinking, am I giving him too much salt with this liver pasta? And I said to my neighbour, whose son was the same age, I said, how much liver pasta can you give a child? And she was like, I don't know, the whole tub. And I was like, but, isn't it bad to give them too much? And she was just looking at me like I'd come from Mars. Like, why would it be wrong to give your child too much liver pasta? And I think it's that kind of very less worry. I mean, when I was pregnant, I think being pregnant was, for me, showed me how different Danish life was. I hadn't been pregnant in England, but I'd heard about it. And I used to go and see my midwife, and she was very much like, oh, well, things seem to be going well. And she said, is there anything you're worried about? I said, no, not really. She said, well, I'm not worried either. See you next time. Yes. And, she'd listen to the heartbeat, and she used the special, tube, old-fashioned tube with that she put to her ear, and she'd listen to his heartbeat. Yeah, everything's fine. And even when things weren't fine, it was still like, they're not fine, but this is what we're going to do. Right. There was no freak out. There was no... I mean, I had a very difficult birth, but at no point did I feel that it was scary.
Right. It's not like in America where everybody's on the brink of a lawsuit about everything at any moment.
Yeah, everyone. It was like, we're going to have to do this now. Is that okay? Yep, just do it. And I noticed we went to antenatal classes, and some of the American couples there were, they almost seemed to think they were giving birth in a third world country. They were like, will they do this? And, I've only had one ultrasound.
And there haven't been 10.
Yeah, exactly. In America, I'd have one every month. And here they're like, well, why? Right. You don't need one every month. If there's a problem, then I think that's very much a Danish attitude is, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
And they have expressions about that, right? Well, that sounds like they have a good equivalent for that. I feel like I've heard a lot of Danish expressions translated by friends who will say, this Danish expression means that, or it means nothing is so bad, it's not good for something else. There's that culture of everything can be done. We can figure this out.
Yeah. I think that's and if there isn't a problem, I when I was in Germany, I was told my son needed to have his eyes tested, and I thought I'll wait till we're back here, more comfortable doing it here. So I went to see the optician. I said, I think I need to get my son's eyes tested. He said, why? I said, well, because my doctor in Germany told me so. Has he got a problem? Can he not see? And I said, no, he can see perfectly. He can see miles. And he said, well, then you don't need to get his eyes tested. Right. And that was it. And he said, if you've got a problem, we'll do it. But if you haven't, no problem. And I think that's very much the attitude is, if there's no problem, then we don't need to do anything about it. Whereas sometimes I think in England, particularly, you'd go see a doctor, there's actually nothing wrong with you, but they go, oh, well, here, have something, and, to keep you happy. But here it's like, no, you're fine, go home. Or you don't need to do that. And my husband's always saying everything's fine here until someone gets hurt. And I think that is it. You know, they can climb all over a tree, and as long as you're sensible, but it's a lot of personal responsibility. You know, if you want your child to climb on a tree, your child climbs on a tree. If your child falls down and cracks his head, your child's fallen down and cracked his head. You take him to the hospital. And I find that people don't interfere in your life. Again, being pregnant, I was very small when I was pregnant. I didn't put a lot of weight on, but they consider it to be healthy here. I went back to the UK and I got so many comments about how small I was, and, you know, is your baby healthy? Is this right? And, you know, you're 8 months pregnant and that's what you look like. And I just, you know, but here nobody sort of judged, nobody said, oh, you're too small, and nobody came up to me in the street and poked at me and gave me their opinion. It was like, you know, you look quite healthy, we'll leave you to it.
Right.
So
I've talked to some Danes who have their complaints about the intervention of the Danish state, usually in the tax system, but it sounds like there's plenty of ways in which it leaves you alone as well. You know, people say America, the state doesn't intervene that much, but then there's all these signs telling you what you can't do, where you can go, all these guardrails because of the laws, essentially, and the lawsuits, as I say, to make my standard lament about my homeland. But here, it's a difference. The intervention is not in daily life. You get more freedom in a sense.
You do. There are rules, of course there are rules, and they are quite rule-based. I mean, you go to any park here, there'll be a sign that will say what you can and can't do in the park. And you're not supposed to cycle in the parks. And
I can't read these signs, so it's okay.
There are pictures. There are pictures to help you. And I was on my bike cycling, and it's because we needed to take some photographs of me on my bike or something. And this woman came up, and she didn't make a big deal. She just said very quietly in Danish, "Du må ikke," which means you may not. Or you must not, you must not. And that's all she said. And I was so embarrassed, you know, I got off the bike, and that meant more than somebody coming up and going, "Oi, you, get off your bike." You know, she was just like, you must not. So there are rules, but I think people know what those rules are. They know what the rules, you know, you can't have an open fire in the park, you know, you can't ride your bike in the park. And yes, we do pay a lot of taxes here, but you get a lot for your taxes. Loads of museums are free. Lots of cultural things are free. Libraries are free, museums are free, and libraries are brilliant. A lot of things are free. Healthcare is very, very, very good, and you don't have to pay for it except for out of your taxes. And, you know, there's no quibbling over what you need to have done. If you need to have something done in hospital, you have it done. So there is the flip side of high taxes is good services. And I think that as an expat, I appreciate that. I sometimes feel in England you pay your taxes and they disappear somewhere, and you don't see what you're getting from it. You see what you're getting from them here. Clean streets, you know, your bins are emptied regularly. You don't see a lot of policemen, but, you know, it's a safe environment. The public transport is clean and regular, so it runs very well because of the money the city has.
There's this sense, I think, in America and maybe the UK that our tax money, we could pay more, but they're just going to waste it. Like, they're never going to spend this right. Why even give it to them? Like, we don't. It's not that we don't in our country. It's not that we want to not pay taxes. It's more like we just don't think, we don't have that confidence that they're going to be well used, right? Is it the same?
I think in England it was difficult for me because I used to work in government relations, and I also used to work in local authorities.
So you're the best person to ask about.
So I had a bit more of an understanding about the reality, but I could also understand people's perception.
And that's what I want to know, is that what were the perceptions?
People do perceive they pay taxes for nothing sometimes, you know, and they're like, you know, they didn't come and collect my bins, and they didn't do this, and they haven't swept my street, and, you know, and I think in the wider scheme of things, you look at, when you work in government, you can see where money is going, but at the same time you can understand people's frustrations. But I think in the almost 6 years since I've left the UK, I think it has changed a lot. You know, I hear about a lot of friends who work in teaching who complain about how much their budgets have been cut, and, you know, people are seeing a lot of cuts, but then the whole world is having to cut back.
Right. What do you think the difference is? People like how their tax money is used here for the most part. People dislike how their tax money is used in America and England.
I think sometimes some Danish people don't. I mean, one of my
I've met people who don't, but I wouldn't want to generalize.
My husband's colleague was saying about Alex said to him, Mel takes Noah to the library all the time. And he says, I never take my son to the library. Perhaps, I should pay less tax because of it. But people don't like paying high taxes, but you do see what you get for it. But then again, perhaps if I was Danish, I might not have such a positive attitude to it, because it would have been how life has always been. And maybe I think, I pay all these taxes and I don't see enough. But
why isn't it better?
But when you compare it to Berlin is a very, very poor city. They don't have a lot of tax money in the city to spend, and you see it. You see the streets aren't as clean. You see they don't clean graffiti as quickly as they do here. You do see that there isn't as much money. And I think having lived in Berlin did allow me to see here in a more positive light. Some of the things that maybe annoyed me a little bit, I saw more annoyance in life outside of Denmark.
You mentioned the amount of foods, the variety of foods your son is willing to eat, and he's growing up here, of course, in what to him, I don't know if it's a foreign country to him or not, since he spent most of his life here. Shaking your head no. But a lot of my friends are having kids, and many say that it's important to raise the kid as a citizen of the world in some sense, maybe take some time in another country. Certainly start with a foreign language or two right away. And many of my friends, one of the couple is from a foreign country anyway. Is it a priority to you that there's a that sort of citizen of the world nature of your son's life growing up?
I think so. I think he has. I don't know. I can't reflect on other people's children of the same age in England, but I think he has much more of awareness of countries. He understands that we lived in Germany, but we come from England, although he's never been to England.
Denmark is not the world to him, the universe.
And he knows that now we live in Denmark, but he knows that his grandparents live in France, and he knows that his grandpa lives in Florida, and he can open a map and he can show you where all those places are, and he has an awareness of different cultures. He goes to an international preschool. There are a lot of Indian kids there. They're celebrating Diwali this week, so he has an awareness that not everybody is the same, and food isn't the same, and he will try most foods. We recently took him to, a friend of mine runs a Vietnamese restaurant here. We took him there for his birthday. He said to me he wanted to go to Mummy's friend's restaurant.
Yes,
and we went there, and it's the first time he'd had Vietnamese food, although he'd had Chinese food. And we ordered a selection of food, and my friend was sort of like, if you don't eat it, I'll pack it up. And I was like, so if you don't eat it all, just pack it up. And then she came at the end of the meal and she was like, my goodness, you've eaten everything. And we just pointed at Noah's like, he ate most of it. Right. And he was like, what's this, Mummy? Oh, this is nice. What's that? And he wants to try things. And, he's interested, and he understands that, Vietnamese food is different, that it comes from a different culture. And he sometimes amazes me with some of the questions that he asks. And they are normally based on other cultures or other things. And he's very interested in it. And a lot of people have observed in England have said, he seems so much older than his age, but perhaps that's because he's experienced other cultures and other countries to live in.
Having English parents, does he sort of express some longing to see the ancestral homeland?
He often says, when I go to England, I'm going to do something weird, like I'm going to see a steam train. And I try and point out that we're not going in a time machine back to the 1950s, but, he wants to see a steam train. But he's more interested in, I want to see Ellie, like my friend's daughter, who came here and they really hit it off. So we're often talking to him, we're saying, when probably in a couple of years' time we're going to do like a road trip, and we're going to take him to where we grew up and where we got married, and take him to London and things like that. But he doesn't have a yearning for going to England.
On the blog, do you find yourself mentally writing for expats or for perhaps other Danes who haven't explored the country as much as you might have? Who do you think of?
Do you know, I don't really think... Do I think this is interesting to me? Would I... Actually, I often think of writing to myself back when I first came here. I think, when I first came here, what would I have found interesting? What would I have wanted to have learnt more about? And I often think that, but I often, if something catches me during the day and I think, I love that. We've just eaten herring. Oh, I love herring. Let's write something about that. I try and share a little bit more of myself than I did perhaps at the beginning on there, and people seem to like that, and sort of a bit of a more of an observational style about, like the blog post you mentioned about becoming Danish. People went mad for that. I was really surprised. I kind of, wrote it and found it entertaining myself, and people loved it. Yet sometimes I write things and I think, I would have enjoyed this as a new expat or as a, and I find that it's perhaps not that popular. And there are some things I certainly do for myself. I do a weekly photograph called the Friday Project, and I take in exactly the same point every single week, and I'm going to do an animation at the end of the year going from snow to snow with everything else in between, and that's really for me that I do that. But I belong to a crafting group, and it's an expat crafting group. We meet once a month in a friend's house, and a lot of the ladies that start coming are new here, and I see that kind of rabbit in the headlights look about them. They're overwhelmed, and they're perhaps the people I think I'm talking to on my blog. To reassure them that it's not scary here.
Right, that's important.
And it's not winter all year.
It's not scary here. It's not winter all year. What's something else you wish you'd known upon your arrival to Copenhagen?
What would I have liked to have known? It's very difficult. I think I would have liked to have known that it was a more welcoming country than perhaps it gets the reputation of. I was quite nervous. I thought, how are people going to take me as a British person?
Think of the closed Scandinavian.
Yeah, there is this kind of... But then I read this book, and it was talking about the different Scandinavian countries, and it said basically Denmark is the funny little sister that they indulge the other countries, whereas, Finland is like the stern, older person, and I think I would have liked to have known that it was more as relaxed as it is.
And in some sense a gateway between Europe in the mainstream and the rest of Scandinavia, is it not?
Yeah, I think so, and I think also because we don't have the euro here, it's very much Denmark. It is Denmark, and people are proud of being Danish and are proud of Denmark in the whole. And I think it's that feeling that we're in a little safer country, and you can go to France, you can go to Spain, you can go to all these other countries, but you can still come home. I very much feel this is home. I feel this is coming home. And if I think about when I've ever felt homesick, it's always been for here. Always been from here. I remember when we first moved to Germany, sitting crying and saying to my husband, I want to go home. I want to go home.
Already you didn't like it.
And he said to me, there is no home.
Yes,
this is home now. We can't go back. Our old apartment isn't there anymore. We've got to look forward. And I think that was a very wise thing that he said, that this is home now. And I think living as an expat, that is one thing you have to think of, that even if you're in a transition, even if you're only going to be here, like a lot of people, for 2, maybe 3 years, you've got to make the most of those 3 years. This is your home for those 3 years, and try and maybe look forward to going back to your home country at the end of that stint, but make the most of the experience. And I after the first few months in Berlin, I felt that I did get out, and I did that. I made the most of the experience. And then I found that we were going to be leaving, and we were going to be moving back here. And I had another 8 months living there before that happened. But I almost felt demob happy. I almost felt like I was a tourist again. And I found that I was able to enjoy Berlin more.
It's doesn't go on forever, which nothing does, by the way.
But I think that's how some expats who struggle when they first come here, I think that they should think, it's not going to be forever, so let's try and enjoy what we've got here, and really kind of embrace life in Denmark.
In your blogging, there is seemingly an implicit resistance to a standard expat tendency wherever I go. Is some fall into an easy mode, which is, I don't know if it's complaining, but like, oh, these people here, why do they do this? Why do they do that? This isn't like, what is all this? Just the sort of, not bitterness, but a slightly bitter tinged confusion people have. And it seems like your one goal you may have is to write the opposite of that. It make sense? It
does make very much sense. I was invited to write for another publication here, and I wrote something, and they told me it was too happy.
Well, why did they? Is this a publication where there's not that happy?
It was a publication for expats, and they said it was too happy. That I had to. I think they thought I was some kind of, like Stockholm syndrome. That I was brainwashed and
Copenhagen syndrome.
Yeah, and exactly. And they were like, you're too happy about things. Right. And I think I do try not to let things get me down. Sometimes things might rile me a little bit, but I try and keep it in perspective. But I do try and be positive. And I think there's so much negativity in the world. Who needs another negative blog?
Especially the internet.
Yeah, who wants to read misery? If I'm having I was ill for 9 days in the last week or so, and I was pretty miserable. But I thought, well, what's the point of going, oh, woe is me, I'm so miserable and I've got a tummy ache. I just wanted to be happy, and I think if you keep a happy perspective, it helps you be happy. Of course, I'm not happy all the time. Nobody is. That's not real life.
It would be hard to maintain and probably not worth it.
It would be, and I'd walk around with some strange, crazy smile on my face all the time. But it's not reality. But I don't want to bring people down. That's me, really, I guess.
And finally, you bring up this useful advice, or this useful perspective your husband had, which is there is no home anywhere. Here is home. Wherever we happen to be is home. As much as you love Copenhagen, it sounds like you wouldn't mind having home be another place for a stretch or two. I mean, maybe with the condition that you come back here, or maybe not. I don't know how you think about it. I
think there's a whole world out there. There really is a whole world out there, and there are cities I want to experience, and there are things I want my son to experience. And I feel this will always be sort of the return point. But maybe in the future, if there is an opportunity to spend a year in China, live a year in Beijing, somewhere like that would be an amazing experience, and which is one of the reasons why we decided to enroll my son in an international school, though we love it here, because we don't want to close our mind to the rest of the world. I love going to Paris. I love Paris, but there are so many cities that I haven't visited yet, or places I haven't seen.
The unseen always haunts you.
Yeah, and people say, like my husband's like, oh, let's go back to England and show Noah England. I say to him, there's so many places in the world. You only get so many days holiday a year. Let's do something.
Let's not spend it in a Tesco.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see the world and really experience things. And I have a lot of blogging friends all around Europe, and I look at where they live and I just think, wow, I have a friend that lives on Lake Maggiore in Italy, and I just think, wow, imagine that's what you open your window to every morning. And I want to always have that kind of lust for something new. But I do find, and I think I wrote about this on my blog once, that I still feel this frisson of excitement living here, because there's always something happening, there's always something new to explore, whether it's the World Oyster Shucking competition that I went to a few weeks ago. Nobody wanted to go with me, funnily enough. They wanted to stay home and play Lego. And I went, and I actually thought it was really fun. It was quirky, it was different, and that's what I like. I still want to find those things that are quirky and different and that excite me, even though this is my home.
It's a sign of compatibility. It's got to be that the excitement remains at that base level, no?
Yeah, I think so. It was me. As soon as I moved here, I felt this is me. I can live here. I can be happy here. And I almost felt as if I should have always been here, rather than having come here. It was so much more me than anywhere I'd ever lived in England. Maybe where I grew up in the countryside in a really wooded area, and I loved that. And perhaps that's me. I like that connection with life around me.
I've been speaking here in this hygge rich cafe. Hygge, getting the vowel down. Hygge rich cafe with Melanie Haynes. She is the blogger behind a blog I've read much, but until today didn't know how to pronounce. Have I remembered it right? Dejlige Days?
Dejlige Days.
Dejlige Days. Dejlige Days. Yes, is the name of the blog. Melanie, thanks so much for taking the time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. Special thanks to everyone who backed Season 4 on Kickstarter, including Joel Neville Anderson, Daniel Levin Becker, Paige Calvert, Commander Manvark, Jonathan Crow, John Cunningham, David Dawes, James DeVito, Tim Dobbs, Paul Doyle, Jake Elliott, Kevin Emmett, Lawrence English, Jonathan Filbert, Andrew Philippone Jr., Michael Fransky, John French, Themistocles Eucrucius, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Samuel Hansen, David Hayes, Jeff Hillenbrand, Mark Hines, Andrew Johnstone, Tadeusz Andrzej Kodlubowski, Peter Kavanagh, Ted Kane, Andy Cooney, Evan Landman, Alfred Lee, James Maloney, Sean McDonald, Alberto Bruzos Moro, Jason Miller, Rob Montz, Daniel Murphy, Richard Nash, Aidan Nullman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Ian Blosker, Christopher Porter, MJ Pritchett, Piers Rippey, Rob Schultz, Todd Shimoda, Cam Smith, Deborah Smith, Adam Sutherland, Maureen Kincaid Speller, Anna Treher, Thomas Interberger, Matt Warren, Nick Weigelt, John Wolfe, Cynthia Yang, and Wayne Wright.